feel like we're all ready for a party. It feels very exciting. I'm Anne Davis, and can't hear me. Oh, now closer. I'm a member of Friends of Araluen who, over the last few years, have been honouring people in town by hearing their stories. And we built up quite a following, as you can see, because people's stories, however humble they may feel about them, are really quite extraordinary in all those moments that make up a big life. So thanks for coming. And of course, I acknowledge that we live on Arundel land, and we have the real opportunity in living here to also know Aboriginal people and get to know them and support each other. So I want to acknowledge that. It's something unique about the fact that we live here together in Alice Springs, in Mbantua. The first speaker, I think it's very telling that Lynne Hanton has had to rush from the rehearsal of Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake to be here. So a most amazing long-term life of commitment to families, to young dancers, aspiring dancers, to adults across different genres of dance and well-being and fitness. So it's an absolute privilege to introduce Lynne, and of course very much look forward to her big story. Thank you.
Wow, thank you for coming, and I hope I'm not too boring. Thank you, Friends of Araluen, for holding such an amazing event, and it's been a bit of a wild ride. I always seem to be looking to tomorrow and very rarely look backwards. Oh yes, okay, is that better? And I very rarely look back because there's so much going on in front of me, so having to go back and have a look at my life was a bit surprising, actually, and took me a very long time because I've been around for quite a while. I was born in Adelaide and first came to Alice Springs as an 8-year-old, and it was a bit of a strange way to get to Alice Springs. My mum and dad were married in Adelaide, and subsequently beautiful photographs. I was like, wow, okay. Who did all that material? Oh, I loved it. And then, subsequently, a couple of years later, David and I came along, so I'm the blonde. I was blonde and curly once, and my little brother David. And interestingly enough, in those days, I was born in 1952, so I'll let you do the maths. I think I'm 74. Stopped counting a while ago. My mum and dad separated, which was interesting at the time because it was just the biggest no-no ever. Like, to be a divorced couple was... And as a child, you don't really actually know what that's about. You just sort of hear the whispers and follow the frowning, and anyway... my mum's dad and her brother were working here in Alice Springs building the Memorial Club. So she decided when they separated that she would move to Alice Springs to be with her dad and her brother. So we moved into 9 Giles Street and lived next door to the Hatzmahals, who had 12 children. And I was going to marry George. However, that didn't happen. And Tantubi's house she was so house proud, but the vision that I have is that she used to sweep the floor inside their brick home, which was dirt. And it was sort of like concaved. So she would sweep every day the floors, but there was no cement in, and it was a big party everywhere when they put cement floors into the house. So, but we thought that was great fun. It was always dusty, and bathrooms were tiled first, or anyway. It was a bit of a journey. My dad, or my stepdad, who I always refer to as my dad because as an 8-year-old he just became dad, was a man called Ron Kerr, and he was working for Max and Jack Jewett, who were, I think they had a business called JB and MJ Jewett, and they were aluminium framers, or, you know, they made windows, as I seem to remember. And they made all the windows for the Memorial Club. And Ron, my to-be dad, left Sydney in that car to drive around Australia. So he actually was born in Sydney and did a building apprenticeship in Sydney, and then I think got to Tailem Bend and drove to Alice Springs like many people do. Started work on the Memorial Club, and C'est La Vie never left. And it took 2 years to build the Memorial Club, so I went to Ross Park School, so I think I started in grade 4, sort of towards the end of the year. I wasn't very happy about that, but I soon got to love Ross Park and Alice Springs and Giles Street. And at the same time, well, Alice Springs looked a lot like that when I came. I'd been up on the Ghan a couple of times to visit, which was always a bit of a wild ride. Took, to a child, I think it seems like a week. It was probably 2 days. We used to get off the Ghan and run around in the bush, and then, you know, the whistle would go off and everybody get back on because now we can go again. And I do remember in Alice Springs that the swimming pool was sort of around about where Mad Harry's was. There was no Catholic church. The racecourse was the other side of the Winter Sun Caravan Park. However, my dad built a house, so they were allowed to build a house. Well, that was the Memorial Club when it was finished. It's pretty ordinary, the photographs, but that was kind of like the front and the back. They had those funny chairs. And we always went to the Memorial Club on Saturday nights because there was a children's film first. Then there was a big fight to get all the children to sleep so they could have an adult's film after that. And that actually is Max Stewart and Lorna. I think some people might know them, and I was their flower girl, and that's my mum as the bridesmaid. That was the house that Dad built whilst we were living at Giles Street. This is 9 Babbage Street. So when we moved into that house, it was just dirt, and we were in the middle of an 8-year drought. So to get to Ross Park on the bus, we used to have to run in bare feet across to the Stuart Highway and get on a bus in bare feet with our white socks and our school shoes in our bags. And when we got to Ross Park, we had to wash our feet and go and put our socks and shoes on because it was bull dust from there to the Stuart Highway pretty much. You were just filthy by the time you got to. So Dad tried carrying us over there a few times and, you know, nothing worked. So the house eventually became, well, that's my mum and dad. And then the house sort of became a tiny bit bigger and grew bit by bit. And eventually Mum and Dad, so this is Betty and Ron Kerr. Mum decided she was going to have Philip in Mount Isa. I don't actually quite know why, but anyway, she wasn't going to have Philip in Alice Springs. We were going to fly all the way to Mount Isa in that Cessna, and then come home with a brand new baby in that Cessna, which I also hated. Anyway, that's the way it goes. So this is me just in the backyard with my little brother Philip. I think those chickens came from the racecourse. I have a vague memory of bringing small chickens home from the racecourse. And just showed up in our backyard. And then these are my brothers. And I suppose David is 3 years younger than me, and you can't quite see Peter. He's sitting on the edge there. He's 3 years younger, and then Philip's 3 years younger again. So I have 3 brothers, which I have to say has annoyed me for my entire life. They were loud and boisterous, and I soon learnt that the girls did the cleaning of the bathroom, and the girls did the washing, and the girls did the dishes, and the girls and the girls and the girls. And then that photograph is actually our neighbourhood. So there were like 17 boys that used to come and play at our house, and one girl who was Lynette Davies. So I think that's why I went to ballet. There were no boys. So it was a rowdy neighbourhood, and I did lots of babysitting, and we had lots of fun when we were kids. But we used to run across the Stuart Highway. I can't believe that your parents allow you to do this. We used to run across the Stuart Highway to the telegraph station and hide in the caves in the hills. And the rules were come home at dark. So as soon as it was dark, we went home. And now when I think about that, I think, I don't know about that, but anyway. And the house grew a little bit bigger. And, you know, as we sort of got a little bit older, I finished school at Ross Park and went to the Alice Springs High School. So while I was delving through all my bits and pieces, I found my Alice Springs High School prefect's badge, which I still have. So I don't know where that came from. But I did start ballet at the Alice Springs Youth Centre. And it was girls' club on Mondays and Thursdays, and boys' club on Tuesdays and Fridays, and everybody could go on Saturday. So it was ballet on the days that I could sort of wangle my way into the youth centre, and then I would sort of try and get there on Boys' Day and under the guise of practising. But the youth centre was a hive of activity for all of the kids in town. So it was either ballet, trampolining, calisthenics, or sport, or Cubs and Scouts. So I spent a lot of time at the Alice Springs Youth Centre. And over time, while I was at high school, so high school was a surprising event. I was never the greatest academic, and I was never going to be. And they asked me at high school what I wanted to do, and I said I wanted to be a teacher. So when I went home and told Dad I was going to be a teacher, he said, "But you don't like doing your homework. So how are you going to go to Teachers College, which is in Adelaide, which we can't really afford, for you to study, which you don't like doing, to maybe be a teacher one day, when actually you'll probably just get married and have a family?" So I was a bit incensed, but anyway, I was already irritated because there was 1A, 1B and 1C, and 1A was for obviously the scientists and the doctors. I think 1B was for the maybes, and 1C was for the typists, secretaries and other people. So I was obviously in 1C my first year at high school, and I was 12. So I can't believe I was at a high school at 12. And we did first year, second year, intermediate, which was the third year. And if you were in 1A, you could go on and do leaving certificate, which was your fourth year at high school. So I turned 13, 14, 15 and finished my third year at high school, and I was nearly 16. Not doing terribly well, but anyway. I had a lot of friends at St Philip's. Hello, Chris. But it was only a boarding college at the time, so all the bush kids boarded at St Philip's, but they came to the high school, so we were actually in the same class as all the bush kids. And my dad, as a builder, built lots of homesteads, so we to my disgust, would have to go all the way out to Lucy Creek. So he built the Lucy Creek homestead and Dado quite a few other homesteads. So in the school holidays, we would be packed up in the car and take like an 8-hour trip to Lucy Creek, so to go through Huckata and Mount Riddick and Harts Range and, you know, stop and have a cup of tea with everybody along the way. So I knew the Webbs pretty well, and the two, Estelle and Marilyn Webb, lived just across the road from us when we were in town. So our family knew a lot of bush people. So Jervois Mine with all the Johansons, Uratipura, Agadagada, well, they had 25 boys between those two stations and one girl. I was like, the Fogartys had 4 boys and 1 girl, and it's like everywhere I went there were boys. And obviously the builders, when they were out on the cattle stations, sometimes we would have 29 people sitting down at the dinner table in the shed. And these were all electricians, you know, all the different types of builders that you have. But who did all the washing? And who made all the cakes and the bread and the, I don't know, so I was out of that kitchen. Any opportunity I could get, I would not be in the house. So I would be preferred to be riding, mustering cattle, anything, just not doing the washing. With one of those washing machines where you have to feed the clothes through the wringer and wind it. Yeah, anyway, there was a lot of washing and a lot of men and a lot of boys. So these were typical, you know, back roads. So we were always somewhere. And if we didn't get back into town quickly enough, then we'd be on School of the Air for a few weeks, and then we'd finally get back to town, or the river was running. Or, you know, there's always a story in Alice Springs. Nothing ever seems to go smoothly. And this is another story I can't believe when I think about it. So Philip was less than 12 months old, and when we got to Lucy Creek, the creek was running and the homestead was on the other side. So Dad said, well, I'll drive 1 kilometre north, and Lynn, you can get in and swim, but don't swim against the current, just swim down the river. And when you get to the homestead, just get out on the other side. So, you know, I didn't really think much about it because I could swim, so I guess, you know. So first he put me in, so I went. Then he put David in, so he said, catch David when he gets there, just make sure he gets out. Watch out for Peter, don't go near any logs. So if you see a log, just paddle. And then Mum came along, and then Dad with Philip on his shoulders. So can you imagine? I just sort of think to myself, I don't know what sort of parents I had, but anyway. They were definitely in charge. Nothing was, you know, the territory's just crazy. I just put that photo of Philip there because that's the car seats that we used to have. And I was always at the racecourse. So by the time I was probably 12, I used to earn my money every morning by going down to the racecourse at 4:30 in the morning and riding the racehorses, and then coming back and then going to school by 8:30. So I used to earn 20 cents every time I took one of the horses out. And we used to take the horses from the back of Wintersun Caravan Park over to where I live on Lovegrove Drive, that was a racetrack, and race them around and then take them back. So I was pretty much horse mad. So I had bought that horse home for Philip to have a ride on, but it wasn't one of the race horses. And these are just little sort of shots of us growing up. And the other thing that's sort of annoying is that, well, I found it annoying, probably why I know a lot about Australia though, is that car that they're standing in front of, 4 children and a station wagon. So all the pack rack at the top had all the suitcases and everything on it wrapped in plastic. And we literally drove from Alice Springs down the Plenty Highway, through Lucy Creek, out the back through Tobermory or wherever they go, I don't know, Mount Isa to Townsville, from Townsville to Sydney. Sydney to Adelaide, Adelaide to Port Augusta, put the car on the train, come home on the train. We did that 3 or 4 times with the boys in the back and me, Philip sitting in the front in that little car seat or wherever, in a sedan, no air conditioning, nothing to, like now I sort of think, wow, is that actually real? But anyway, it's the things you learn. So those were the relatives in Sydney. This was a bit of, racetrack riding. Oh, I did meet the Duchess of Kent. So in bare feet, I think, okay, that's a funny photograph. I don't have any shoes on. But yeah, she was lovely, and we got public holidays, so we got a day off school if royalty came. So I think that happened 2 or 3 times while I was at school. But she asked me what I did, so I told the conversation there was that I trained racehorses in the morning, but my favourite thing to do was ballet, and I didn't like sport, which is what I was doing. That's the very first swimming pool we ever swam in, which was just a galvanised iron circle that Dad welded together and put concrete in the bottom and poured water in it, and pretty much works. And that is my ballet teacher. I don't know what that strange tree is doing there. Oh, I forgot to put a photo in there, sorry. The tree doesn't mean anything. So Virginia Hunt was known as Mrs. Smith when she came to Alice Springs, and she was a professional dancer and married a SARTAS pilot who was transferred to Alice Springs. So she had 3 children when she arrived in Alice Springs and just taught ballet. There was only 5 of us in her class. So the 5 of us got a lot of attention. It was like having private lessons from a professional dancer for pretty much my whole life at the youth centre. And what actually happened was that the Western Australian, or the Australian Ballet, had been formed, and they decided they had so much work. They split themselves into 3 parts. So they had the Queensland part and the Western Australian part. So the Australian Ballet stayed in Victoria and sort of South Australia. The Western Australian part of the ballet company did Western Australia and the Northern Territory, and the Queensland part did New South Wales and Queensland. So they travelled a lot, and apparently they maintained in the beginning, if you're an Australian company, then you have to travel Australia. So when the Western Australian Ballet Company finally came to Alice Springs, they came when I was quite young. I can't remember how old, but it was an amazing event. But the Alice Springs Youth Centre had to put timber on the stage, was the actual criteria. If there wasn't a wooden stage, they weren't coming. So the wooden stage was built by Dad and a few other people. So they eventually came because we had the wooden stage, and it was a big event in Alice Springs. And they came back every year, I think, for quite a while. But we used to billet the dancers, so there weren't really any motels where they could stay. So as a dancer, I would take one of them home to my place, and you had them stay with you, much like you billet sports people today. It's the same sort of idea. So we had lots of fun. And one of the times that they came, there was a reception for them at Simpson's Gap. And we went out to Simpson's Gap, and one of the dancers was messing around out at Simpson's Gap and fell off one of those slippery rocks out there, which was covered in sand, and she broke her ankle. So the only person in Alice Springs who was the same size and could do ballet just happened to be me. So it was a bit like, oh, well, you know what you're doing, so we'll just go back into town, you can rehearse this part, and then we'll ask you mum and dad if you can do it, and, the costume will fit because you're the same size, and, So I have this person with a broken ankle trying to tell me which way to go and who to stand behind, and I didn't know any of them, so it was a bit... I don't remember much of it because I was very focused on getting it right, so I don't actually remember much of it. Then, of course, they had a tour to finish, so they went to my mum and dad and said, "Do you think she could finish the tour?" They didn't ask me. They consulted amongst themselves. So in the end, Dad said, "Oh, how do you feel about leaving school?" And I went, I was about to take my very last exam, and they said they could bring the exam forward, which I didn't want to do anyway. And I'd been told by my headmaster I'd probably get a D for history if I didn't pull my socks up. So leaving school seemed to be like, tick that box. So the leaving school part I heard. The rest of it I wasn't really ready for. However, at the end of the week, so I travelled with strange people I didn't know. But they were very good, and, it wasn't hard, but I was pretty much out of my comfort zone, I think they call it today. And at the end of the week, they gave me an envelope with money in it, and I said, "Oh, what's this?" And they said, "Oh, that's your money for your ballet." I said, "Oh no, that's not how it works. I have to pay you." And they said, "No, when you work as a dancer, you get paid." And I said, "But my mum and dad are always threatening me if my room's not clean, they're not going to pay my fees. So aren't I paying you?" And they said, "No, you just need to take this over to the bank and open a bank account and put the money in the bank and just don't worry about it." So I went over to the bank, and the very nice bank teller said, "Oh, name, etc." And then he goes, "Are you a minor?" And I went, "Do I look like a minor to you? I'm a ballet dancer." So I can still see the look on his face. And he said, "Oh, okay." So he just continued filling them. So that's how green I was. Now when I think about it, it's like very embarrassing. And I had been an assistant teacher with my ballet teacher for quite a few years. And I went to class one day with the company, and they said, "Oh, you'll have to do your own class because Louis Marino," his name was, the director, he's sick, so he can't teach." So the pianist was playing, but all these dancers weren't really doing very much. And I was thinking, well, I don't know, why don't they just do the class? And they were looking very lazy, and, anyway, I said, "Oh, well, you could do this if you want." And so they all started doing it. And I thought, oh, okay. And they said, "Well, you know what you're doing, so you can teach the class." I was 17. And I thought, oh, okay, well, so I'd never experienced a pianist, so that was difficult. But anyway, I taught the class. And then, all of a sudden it became, well, you can take rehearsals. So I didn't like people who didn't stand in straight line. I was already very, why don't you stand in a straight line? It's not that hard. And anyway, over time I figured that I loved every part of ballet. I liked the rehearsals, I liked the travelling, I liked the people, I liked the discipline. And as soon as the audience turned up, I was like, not keen. So I soon sort of realised that I was much better directing, rehearsing, teaching, but not actually performing. And still to this day don't like being here in front of people, but I've sort of come to learn that that's life, really. So I ended up coming back to Alice Springs. I don't remember how or why. So that's a bit of a vague part of my life, but I figured that I was probably really homesick and came home. But when I came home, I met my husband, Tony. These are sort of, when I came home, that's what I looked like. If you can believe it. We had a pet kangaroo, and the house had been extended even further, and I met Tony. So I ended up working for Paul Everingham as a secretary, and started a ballet school because I really still wanted to be a teacher. So I just was teaching ballet, but not seriously, but I was teaching ballet at the time. And eventually married and had 2 children, and we moved to Adelaide for 3 years, which I realised why I liked living in Alice Springs while I was living in Adelaide. So it was a bit of that, I don't want my child going to school with a concrete or asphalt. No ovals, like the space is just not there. And if you go to Ross Park and Alice Springs High School, and it's just wide open spaces everywhere and bush, and it's very different. So I decided my children were being educated in Alice Springs. So back we came. Tony worked for Luigi Ruffino at Il Sorrentino, which I still miss to this day, Luigi's food. Then Luigi and Greg Dick and my husband Tony decided that they were going to open Flynn Drive Supermarket. So by then my kids, I don't actually know where I am here. Oh, these are the dancers from the Western Australian Ballet. Sorry, I knew I'd go off topic a bit. That was the only photographs I have, really. But yeah, anyway. That's my mum and dad. It's just, my wedding, I guess. The funny thing about that was that when I got married, the photographer dropped the roll of film and it split open and the negatives. Yeah, so I only have photographs from guests at the wedding, not actual wedding photographs. And our little people. A boy, oh, goodness me. If he was born first, I'll tell you. And yeah, still writing, I guess, at times. Anyway. It was, a bit of a, I suppose opening Flynn Drive was a big story in Alice Springs, and it was, we lived on Lovegrove Drive. When we first moved back to Alice Springs, we moved into Molly Clark's house in Goyder Street, and then we moved to Lovegrove Drive, and we're still there. And I'm still frowning at the hard ground underneath where I used to ride horses because it's so hard. It's like rock underneath our front lawn, but anyway. And then on Lovegrove Drive, there was lots of new families with little people. And one day I just decided that I'd gather up all the small children on the street, the girls, and take them to the Alice Springs Youth Centre and teach them a ballet class. So they were my Lisa was 3 and I think Angela was about 6. So that week there were 6 children, the next week there were like 24 children, and the next week there were like 38 children, and then there were more. So in the end, a ballet school just evolved. I don't think I've ever done anything deliberately. It just sort of happened somehow. So then by the time Angela was actually a very talented dancer, and by the time she was sort of getting up to about, that 11, 12, I thought, actually I've had no formal training as a ballet teacher, or any teacher at all for that matter, but I'm busy teaching people's children, so I probably should do something about that. David Howard in New York was the only person in the world that was offering teachers' classes, and you couldn't study anatomy unless you were going to go to university to become a doctor. And I figured that if you were teaching a person's anatomy from age 3 to 12 and beyond, you might want to know what you're doing. So I ended up going to New York, studied with David Howard, and that was an amazing experience. He was a brilliant, brilliant dancer to begin with the Royal Ballet. He ended up in America because there's more energy and more opportunities in America than there are in England. But he opened my eyes to a lot of possibilities, and just do it. Don't worry about what other people say or think, just do what you're doing and don't look sideways, just always look forward. So I came back. Then the Northern Territory government had decided that they would have a guest teacher for the ballet dancers in Darwin. So I was on the phone. This is in 1983. I got on the phone and I said, well, if this particular person is going to Darwin, why can't she stop and teach in Alice Springs? Because, in those days you had to fly to Alice Springs, stay overnight and then fly to Darwin. You couldn't go straight through. And they said, oh, we would rather fly your dancers to Darwin. So they flew 5 of my girls and myself to Darwin, and we spent 2 weeks with Anne Jenner, who had just retired from the Royal Ballet Company. She was a principal dancer for 14 years at the Royal Ballet, and she was going to Darwin. I was thinking, who organised that? What is she going to teach? You can't go from here to there. Anyway, we subsequently got on like a house on fire. So she grabbed onto me and said, well, her idea was that she was going to go to Darwin and teach lots of different ballets from the Royal Ballet. So she had lots of choreography from the Royal Ballet. She was just going to teach everyone in Darwin. They were all going to do it for their parents. This is in 2 weeks, mind you. And she brought costumes with her, and she is, I don't know if there's a Energizer Bunny by 5, but that's what Anne Jenner was like. So she's like, I'll teach them, you rehearse them. I'll teach them, you rehearse them. So it was on fire for the whole 10 days. We just went crazy, and she screamed and yelled the whole time for 2 weeks. And in the end, she put on a performance with 17 different items in this performance, and the full ballet of Sylphides for people who came. I still to this day can't believe she pulled that off. But at the end of it, she said, well, you can do this for the parents when you get home. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, you could probably just start a ballet company if there isn't one. Is there one in Alice Springs? Or in a ballet company? You've got to be kidding. And she said, well, you could just have a ballet company. And I just sort of wrote it off. But when I was flying back to Alice Springs, I thought, actually, they're opening the theatre in 1984. Maybe I'll just go in and see if I can hire the theatre. And they can do it on the stage at Araluen. So I don't even know where these thoughts come from. But anyway, I got off the plane, and the next day I walked down here and just went, there was just building rubble everywhere. So I went into the site office and said, oh, when is Araluen opening? They said, oh, 1984, in June. And I said, oh, can I hire the theatre? I said, oh, yes. And Jonathan Siddle was the technician, and he said to me, actually, it would be good to have someone in here before the opening of Araluen to make sure everything works. So we booked a date, which was the 19th and 20th of April, 1984. So I went back to the youth centre and just absolutely caned those poor kids. And they learnt everything that Anne Jenner had taught us in Darwin. However, this was Royal Ballet choreography, the whole of Sylphides, and choreography that I'd also learnt from the Australian Ballet. So we literally came to Araluen, nothing, so the communication systems didn't work, so we had cardboard being poked out on the side of the stage, and the dance floor was nearly here, not quite. I didn't know what I was doing, the technicians didn't know what they were doing. And in the end, we had the most amazing performance, 2 full houses, because everybody in the community wanted to see what Araluen looked like on the inside. So when my lot walked out on the stage to a full house of people sitting in beautiful red seats, and they'd all had tickets, and, you know, it was amazing. And I just stood on the side of the stage. I was like, oh my God, I don't even know what's going to happen. But the house curtain went up, it came down, up, and it was just absolutely amazing. It was the most amazing performance I've probably ever done, and the audience just were, you know, on their feet, yelling and cheering, because the Alice Springs community had raised the money to build Araluen along with the government, so it was a big deal, I think, at the time. But I was like 20-something, I barely remember it. But I just remember the lead up. The dance floor, we performed on Friday and Saturday, and the dance floor was delivered on Saturday morning. So one night we performed on Shiny Side Up Masonite, and the next night we danced on the floor that we still danced on this afternoon. So it's a bit of a wild ride. But Anne Jenner's that little petite person in the blue, and the people behind them are the people that she was teaching ballet to. Like, they literally did not even have a uniform. Yeah. So these were some of the dancers. So one of them is actually my son, and the little one there is Lisa, my daughter. She's currently teaching in Darwin, and they're about to arrive here next week to perform in Swan Lake. So she's the other end of the territory. And that's Dirk van den Driesen and Danielle Dewhurst. And that was Araluen on its very first evening on the shiny side up Masonite. One photo, there's one photo. And then, after that, there was lots of travelling around. I continuously went to the Australian Ballet, developed study tours, realised that, in Alice Springs you seem to think that what you're doing is not quite enough. But also when you live in Alice Springs, you realise very quickly that you can go, oh, this is Lynne Hanton, I'm from Alice Springs. And they go, oh. And they go, I'm just wondering, we don't have much ballet here, so I'm just wondering if I can bring a group of students down to the Australian Ballet and if they could watch class. They go, oh, yes, certainly, because Alice Springs seems like, I don't know, it has that sort of like, yes, we definitely would like to help you. And then you take the best that there is from everywhere that you go and bring it back. And sometimes you turn around and think, actually, we're doing a bit better than other people, which is a surprise to me. I often sort of, even when we go to the Prague International Masterclasses, I think, what is the matter with them? Like, what is that? And then I think, oh, just hang on a minute, you're from Alice Springs, you might want to just, settle down a bit. So this was us that photograph, newspaper photograph was outside of the Sydney Opera House on one visit to the Australian Ballet. They decided it was a news story, so can you please go out on the front steps and we'll take a photograph with a couple of the dancers. And yeah, anyway, I think I'm well past my half an hour. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. That is the ballet company in 1993. That's me on stage talking to Colin Peasley, who was instrumental in, along with Jane Bannister, I think, with my Order of Australia medal. Which I'm not really supposed to know anything about, but Colin Peasley passed away a short time ago, and Mark Brinkley sent me all the documentation that he'd written. Naughty boy, he always does, things like that. This is a recent photo shoot that we've just, so the ballet company obviously has evolved over time. We've done hundreds of performances, lots and lots of students. We moved from the youth centre out to Diorama. I've been in the Diorama Village in the big building at the back in one studio, moved over to where the medical centre is at the moment, moved back, and we have the whole building at the moment and still fighting for space over there. So it's, it's a lot. We started Premium Pete simply because about 15 years ago you couldn't get decent fruit and vegetables here, so it was like, well, dancers need good food, maybe. So I said to Tony, well, you're retiring soon, so maybe you could just bring fruit and vegetables up and sell it. And started off with 40 kilos and turned into 240,000 tonne a year or something ridiculous. Anyway, it helps pay the rent. So there's been a lot, thousands and thousands of students, and I'm well, not thousands and thousands, but there's a lot. And I'm proud of all of them. And, I'm probably the great-grandparent of some children. Like, they've been in the ballet company, had children, the children have come to ballet, and they've got children who are coming to ballet, which is, a bit sad in a way, but... Jasper, who's stage managing or working at Araluen now, he was a student of mine. Lots of my 3-year-olds are currently looking after rehearsals, and we have a succession plan for them to take over from us. or from me when I decide not to teach. However, I haven't decided that. People keep saying, when are you retiring? I think, well, actually, I have retired years ago, because I don't really feel like I work. I just am in my most comfortable place, I guess. So, and young people, young children keep you on your toes constantly. They'll tell me every day, you know, my grandma looked like you and she died. Yeah. Okay, that's sad. Do you think you'll die? When will your heart stop beeping? She said. Oh, I said, well, actually, I don't know, but it's a good question. That's so funny. They're just, yeah. Anyway, so just to finish off, I'll say one thing. I think the Northern Territory is an amazing place. Alice Springs and the people in it are, I don't know, it doesn't matter where I go or who I talk to. It's just so fulfilling. Like every person that you speak to seems to be doing something or involved in something, or, you know, there's a discussion or a chat or something or other. It's never hard to be in Alice Springs. Well, there's some hard things, but I was just quickly tell you about one trip that I remember vividly, driving from here to Adelaide. I had received my OAM on, I think it was, just May or something or other, June. And then we were travelling to Adelaide, and I was freezing cold and don't like travelling in the car. So I was snuggled up on the back seat of the car under a quilt until we got to Marlborough. And then Tony got out to put petrol in the car, and I said, I'll just go to the loo. And when I went to go, the fellow said, oh, it's closed, we're cleaning it. And I went, oh, okay, at 3 o'clock in the morning or something. So I said to Tony, oh, they're cleaning the toilet, so I'll just go to the toilet down the road somewhere or other. And he thought I got back in the car. Then the cleaner came out. She said, oh, no, it's all good, you can go in now. So I just went into the toilet and he left. So I was left in Marlborough in socks, no money, no wedding rings, nothing. I had nothing. And it was freezing cold. And I thought, oh, I don't know. So I ran into the petrol station and said, oh, can you tell them to stop that car down the road? They're going, oh, no, well, did you have a fight with your husband? I went, no. Anyway, I had to walk all the way down to the police station, so I'm surprised how many houses there are in Marlborough. I had to walk a kilometre down to the police station, and they went, well, how do we know who you are? And I said, oh, well, no, I haven't had a fight. I went to the... No one drives off and leaves their wife without a reason. So I said, oh, do you have the Centralian Advocate? And they went, yes. And I said, there's a photo of me in the paper. I went, so he limped off the police and he came back and he goes, OAM one day and stranded in Marla the next. So Tony did drive all the way to Cooper PD. Wondered why I didn't get out of the car. And had to drive all the way back to Marlborough and to pick me up from the police station. Very embarrassing. Anyway, the Territory is an amazing place.
Oh, one amazing woman. Let's thank her again. And thank goodness all those boys drove her to the theatre and to dance. Thanks, Lynne. Yep. Cheryl North is with us, but she's just arrived because she had the car breakdown, just what you don't want to have happen when you're speaking at Witchetty's. So let's just have a few minutes, just 5, so that Cheryl can link up with Jasper with her photos, and then we'll be able to have the privilege of listening to her. She has done lots of work around the NT, so I think we'll also accord with Lynne that it's a very special place. So thanks, 5 minutes and we'll head off again. Okay. I'm going to apologise for Cheryl because having your car break down is enough, but then when the techniques break down too, we're just going to save her up for another day. So you can just know that you could plug Chris Tudor in any time, any place, and we're going to be loving to hear what he has to say to us today. 30 years heading up St Philip's College.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Taking it from a small residential boarding facility into a year 7 to 12 high school of hundreds of children. And I'd imagine many of us here had that very special relationship with Chris and the school for many years. I know that for my daughter and son-in-law, they were so inspired as workers on the staff working with Chris Tudor. I'm sure they still quote to me the things that he said, his passion, his metaphors, his real take on positive life that have just lasted with them for all those years. So introducing Chris, and yeah, thank you very much.
The biggest problem when you get older is that when you come onto the stage, number one, you don't trip as you get on, and when you get off, you don't fall on your face. So that's all under control.
So far.
Yeah, so far I haven't got off it yet. There. Is that comfortable? Is that comfortable? No. Right. Just by the way, this guitar is made out of Californian redwood, and the redwood comes from just down the road from where my little farm, which I only occasionally go to, exists in Jamison. And it was planted there during the gold rush, and it grew up, etc., and the trees fell down, and the guy who runs Cole Clark was there, got bogged, and the police had to pull him out. And he said, "What are you doing with this timber here?" And they said, "Oh, nothing." He said, "I'll buy it." And then he started to make guitars out of it. And my son spied one of these in the music shop in Mansfield. "Dad, you got to get it." I said, "I'm just retired, I haven't got enough money." And and then one morning, I suppose this is life, isn't it? I wasn't going to, I've got all this stuff I was going to say written down, but anyway, one morning, having said no, I reckon it was about 3 years later, one morning I woke up and thought, I don't care, I'm getting in the car and I'm going to go and buy that guitar. Simple as that. Now, you all know this song because you would have learned it in primary school, and there's a purpose to sing it, but so please join in. When first I left old island shore, such chance as we were told of how folks in Australia could pick up lumps of gold, how gold dust lay in all the streets and the miners' rights were free. Hurrah, says I, me loving friends, that's just the place for me. Come on, you'll know the chorus. With my swag all on me shoulder, Black Billy in my hand, I'll travel the bushes of Australia like a true-born native man. We made our way to Geelong town. Who's heard of Geelong town? Right. Went north to Ballarat. Who's heard of Ballarat? Oh, one or two. Where some of us grew mighty thin, the rest grew sleek and fat. Some tried their luck at Bendigo and some at Fiery Creek. I made me fortune in a day, I blued it in a week. Anybody blown a fortune in a week? Oh, nobody. Oh, that's a pity. With my swaggle on my shoulder, Black Billy in my hand, I'll travel the bush of Australia like a true-born native man. So why would I sing that? Why would I sing that song? Why would I sing that song? I was going to sing another song, and I thought, no, there's no story with it. But anyway, this one's only a little story. So the original Tudor, and when I was at primary school, it was, Tudor, you're related to Henry VIII and all the rest of it. No. The original Tudor who came to Australia, came from England, he was a blacksmith. Yeah, I suppose he'd make the crown, but he'd never wear it. Who went digging at Friarstown near Bendigo. And so that was it. And if you want to see him, you can't, but you can find his grave in the Bendigo Cemetery still. Next one. Second year teaching, long time ago, 1975, I wrote a musical. Now, I cheated because I didn't write the music. I used Australian folk songs for the kids. The name of the musical was called The Golden Nugget, and the star of it was Dennis O'Reilly, about whom this song has been written. And the musical, because I found it the other day. I've been looking into it for years, and I re-found it the other day. The musical was called The Golden Nugget. Now, some of you probably know where I'm going. My son-in-law is indeed a golden nugget. For those who don't know him, his nickname is Nug. Is that right, Sarah?
Yeah.
No, I've written a whole lot of stuff because if I don't know it these days, I just ramble. The request to do this talk was short, thought-provoking. It really was. I actually got quite anxious because these days, instead of speaking to a school, I usually speak to a whole mob of kangaroos. I've got 45 kangaroos at Mansfield. I've got 10 wombats, and occasionally some of the deer come in to say hello. Like many, I came to Alice Springs for 3 years, but have now stayed for 40. I do have a little 100-acre farm in Mansfield, Victoria, but my home is Alice Springs, because everybody asks me, you're back, are you? Well, I've been here for the last year. But my home is still Alice, and all my involvement with organisations is in the NT. My wife Jill and I had a wonderful careers here as teachers and school principals. Our 4 children grew up here, and 3 remain as teachers. James, Sarah, by the way, Sarah, where's Davey tonight? And Davey. All are also active community members in our multicultured, very interesting, stimulating Alice Springs. You know, the multicultural nature of the place is absolutely fantastic, isn't it? You know, I had a staff member who was related to the Afghans at one stage. You know, all this exists in Alice. Together, my children, they have 9 children. Together, those in Alice have 9 children. And I'm really lucky to see the grandchildren grow up. Child 4, Rebecca, ironically, who was the only one out of the 4 who was born in Alice, lives on the Sunshine Coast with her surfer husband and 3 children. To me, Alice is a great, well-known community, a place to love, a world with opportunity, a place that values initiative and the saying, I can, go on, what is it? I can make it happen. I can make it happen. A place with a genuine soul. I would drive into the bush with my dogs, often in the morning, and look towards the positive, rising sun. And this feeling seeps into your very being. I've loved my time here as a family man, as an educator and community service contributor. Classic country town. You know, you might be flat out doing your day job, but there are plenty of opportunities to do a night job as well. Back to early days. Jill, my brother, and I did heaps of youth work in our uni years. A feature of this was hiking. That's the same as sort of out to red in the old days. Any New Zealanders here? Tramping, isn't it? On one adventure, we took 29 kids on the overland trail through Cradle Mountain, Tassie. Like, Rick and I weren't even registered teachers then. I don't know what the insurance company would have said about it. I don't think we had any. The trip was great, but tough. It was really tough. You know, you'd be walking in mud up to your thighs. And these days they've got boardwalks and all that sort of stuff, which is fine, but it takes a lot of the fun out of it. And Jill fell, unfortunately, and rammed a stick into her leg. My brother Rick and a fellow runner walked out, and it was decided that, with the park ranger, that a helicopter was needed. One of our fellow leaders was a regular soldier, so he set up a landing area. Chopper came, off Jill went to hospital in Hobart. Years later, Jill and I were both interviewed for the St Philip's job. And it was this rescue that partly got me the job. How do I know that? Because Mrs Heaslip, who's sitting there, told me. Associated with pleasure and youth work was my guitar, which I carried everywhere. I'm pretty sure I carried it all around New Zealand, Lizzie, when I hitchhiked around New Zealand. I just can't remember putting it into a car, so I don't know what happened to it. But anyway, yeah, we took it everywhere. You'd sing everywhere. Where you went to a pub, you'd sing. Sitting on board a ship, you'd sing, etc., etc. My grandfather gave me my first at about 13. I now have 8 and have given 2 of my grandchildren guitars and taught them to play. They're very good. I love singing. And one of the reasons why I loved singing was that I was a little choir boy for years. And believe it or not, I mightn't remember what happened yesterday, but I can still remember all the stuff that we sang. The youth group we ran was in Blackburn, Victoria. Anybody know Blackburn? Oh, good-o. With about 70 15 to 16-year-olds. We had a reunion a few years ago, I don't know, about 8 years ago, something like that. And it was funny having last seen those kids when they were 17 and then seeing them again when they're 63. And some of them had changed. We then actually, because Rick and I were real gluttons for punishment, we then ran another youth group at a Baptist mission in Port Melbourne, which Port Melbourne's a ritzy area now, but in those days Port Melbourne was a really tough area with tough kids. I learned to steal from those kids. And we took those kids on a camp. We took them on a camp. And one day I came across a kid that had stolen apples, something simple like that. And I'm standing behind him, and there's a leader arguing the point with him. And the kid completely engaged the leader, eye to eye. Meanwhile, as he's talking to the leader, he kept shoveling apples into his pocket. So I haven't used it. Later on, Jill took a job before we were married at a primary school in Port Melbourne. She really liked the kids, and they were very multicultural, and she enjoyed her time as a teacher at Port Melbourne. By this time, I'd left Monash Uni and started my first teaching job at Wangaratta Tech, northeast Victoria. Hands up those who know Wangaratta. Good-o. And interestingly now, the the school, like the tech school, as we all know, which were great schools, were shafted and they were combined with the high schools. So the person that runs the combined tech school, high school, called Ovens College or something now, is David Armstrong. And he was at St Philip's was either 17 or 18 years. James, how long? 17? Right. We were married in 1974 and many of our youth group came to the wedding. Jill then came up to Wangaratta and joined me, which was good because we're married, took a job at Urunga Primary School. Singing continued as a passion in Wang, and we set up a bush band called, it was a pathetic name initially, there were three of us, and it was called the Kelly Country Band. That's a dumb name. So we changed it to the Lazy Harry Show, because we liked the song Lazy Harry's. A key place to play was Tanswell's pub/restaurant in Beechworth. Jill got a job as a waitress and the Lazy Harry Show provided entertainment. Yeah, it was interesting a while back when I was on the board of Scott's Aubrey, I'd come back through Beechworth and I went to Tanswell's to have lunch. I said to the waitress, like an old man saying to the waitress, I said, I used to sing here one stage. She couldn't have been less interested. I thought it was a good thing. At Wang, I also spent 2 years teaching Australia history at Nine School. The students were all, go on, tell me what the next word is. Older than me. No, not at that stage. They were all older than me. And it was funny because the first day, they didn't know, they'd all come from school years ago. They didn't know what to do, to put your hand up and ask to go to the toilet or whatever. And they were a great group of people though. Fellow tech teacher, Peter Jamieson, also taught while Jill and his wife did upholstery. After one of these nights, we were travelling home to our farms in Glenrowan West, next to the Ned Kelly home. True, I didn't make that up, that's true. There were four of us in the car and our dog, Tramp, was in the back. On the Hume Highway, going up to Glenrowan, a semi-trailer careered across the road and hit us, wrecking the car. It's one of those things, every time you're driving at night and semis are going up and down, whatever, you think, I hope they stick on that side of the road. Well, this one didn't. Three of us were okay, but Jill was badly hurt. I got out, I stopped her, I just grabbed the first car that came through and, threw her into the back seat and we got her off to hospital. Sadly, our dog in the back was killed. Jill did get compensation from the trucking company. She had a scar across her forehead, and I suppose they still do. But the compensation was paid by an inch of scarring. So in the end, we had enough money to get a loan and to buy a 40-acre farmlet at Greta, Kelly Country. That's right in the Kelly Country. Jill and I had a heap of jobs between us. Besides teaching and folk singing, I was recruit training officer for the Wang Tech Cadet Corps. They wanted me because of my outdoor ed experience. A minor difficulty because I refused to shave off my beard. I was a bit headstrong in those days. In the end, they needed somebody to do the job. So in the end, the Army gave me special dispensation. Like I was in the cadets, for goodness sake, I was a teacher. And told me that I was the only person associated with it with a beard. Oh, well, that was good. We saved enough money, just interestingly, by that stage, 1975, I think it was, the kids really didn't, if they used guns, it was under supervision on the rifle range or something like that. When I was a kid at school in Victoria, at the start of the day, we would have, I think we had about 400 kids in the cadet. A lot of kids did cadets. Anybody do cadets here? There we go. Yep. We had about 400 kids in the cadet corps,
And at the start of the year, everybody was issued with a 303 rifle, which can fire, a mile. And the direction you were given was, if you're on the tram or train or bus or whatever, you weren't allowed to have the bolt in the rifle. Good story. And the other thing was, you had to keep it clean. There was nothing else. On annual camp, you would have mock wars and all this sort of stuff in those days. Everybody was issued with blank ammunition, and you were told, don't point the gun at anybody, because if you fire a blank, blanks kill at 8 paces. That was it. I don't recall anybody getting killed, but how do you do a risk assessment on that? We saved enough money to take 4 months off with all this work and travel around Australia, including the top of Cape York, the Gulf, Darwin, Kimberley, and back through Western Australia. We had adventure after adventure. We managed to turn the car on its side, cross big rivers, cross the mighty Jardine in 2 rubber dinghies with a motorbike in one pulled by the other. There was somebody rowing in the other. 2 of us swam beside the bike dinghy to keep it upright. What idiots. Why? Why were we idiots? Crocodiles. There were crocs in the Jardine. Our 2 sheepdogs, who travelled with us, swam the river several times. Not good. I don't know. We earned more money, then went overseas for 9 months. You could really get a job, and you get another job, and get another job. For 9 months, through Asia, India, Europe, Scandinavia, on the Travel Cheap Trail. I think probably sometimes called the hippie trail, but we weren't hippies, we were cheap travellers. That would have been 1977. No, 1978. That was 1978. We managed to return to Australia, and during our time away, we both got pretty sick. And, I weigh in at, 82 now. I don't know what this is in modern kilograms, but I dropped down to 8.5 stone. And sitting on an Indian train with wooden seats, I'd sit on my sleeping bag. That was no good. It would compress. And my backside was so bony, it was just absolutely agony. Anyway, makes a good story. We had travelled hard and had a fantastic time. We needed to get a job. And when we came back, we needed to get a job because we were broke. And by the end of 1978, they were getting really harder to get. Tried to get a job in Wangaratta, failed. Ended up in Australia's first ecumenical high school in Maryborough, between Ballarat and Bendigo. And we managed to rent a 100-year-old cottage on a 2,000-acre farm, which became our ideal home for the next 7 years. The school was short as money, so what's new? So the staff all worked hard to make it special. They did. The staff were a very eclectic group of people. I mean, they had to be to work in a school like that. And after a year, I was asked by the head, who was a very interesting character, to be senior master. Christopher, I want you to be senior master. Oh, okay. And I was stupid enough to not ask him, could I have a job description and will you pay me extra? And I still don't know to this day whether I got paid any other for having to deal with the job description, which was verbal, which was to look after the discipline of the boys. Full stop. That was it. No this, that, anything else. I produced musicals. I ran Outdoor Ed, was head of geography and history, played cricket for Coldsfields Cricket Club, and joined the Broken Strings Bush Band. Played around Central Victoria and Sovereign Hill. So he's a respectable teacher during the week, and really happy folky during the weekend. That year, Jill became pregnant and had James Christopher on the 16th of November 1979. Who knows James Christopher? He's going to kill me later. In celebration the next day, this is true, I got 5 wickets against Carisbrook. Now, he was the first baby born in the Maryborough Hospital for 7 weeks. So all the midwives and the nurses, they all clucked around like anybody's business. It was so exciting. And James hasn't recovered. Dogs are special for me. I love building a friendship with them. After the car accident, we got a Border Collie Kelpie pup from Millawa called Sock's Dog. Now, a friend of mine who's 92 this year, he was my head of department. I said, and he ran a farm as well. I said to him, what's a Border Collie Kelpie like? You know, I'd grown up in the city. What's a Border Collie Kelpie like? He said, is there another dog? And a year later, we got a Shetland sheepdog crossed with a Border Collie called Chino. Does anybody know it was called Chino? Because it looked like a cup of cappuccino coffee. They grew to guard us at Wang. They illegally round up the farmers' cattle, would often come to school with me. They would hike through the Alpine, true dinks, they would hike through the Alpine country. They would leave their signatures, true dinks, in the mountain logbooks and would ski with us in the snow. One night, I had to stuff both of them down the bottom of my sleeping bag because I thought they were getting hypothermia. They travelled then round Australia with us and then spent 7 years in Maryborough. They travelled to Alice and took up their very important post. I can remember this. I asked Jan at the interview, is it okay if I brought dogs? And she said yes, which was good. I'd forgotten that. They travelled to Alice, took up their posts as school dogs. Very important job. In fact, school dogs, there are 3 schools in Alice now that have, there are 2 other schools in Alice now that have school dogs. They're called these days, they're not called sheep dogs, they're called therapy dogs. Sadly, Chino went to heaven at 16. Socks had his last fight with camp dogs and soldiered on until just before his 90th birthday. Now, I really love Socks. You can't have favourites, but Socks sort of was. And I wrote a poem about him. Anyway, this is when he in his last little while. Beside the winter fire he'd lie and dream of ventures gone, his aged frame now resting quietly as the hours ticked on and on. His eyes would flicker open and his tail would bravely thud as a knowing look would speak these words of hope and love. Master, will you stroke me with your hand I trust so well? Tell me that you'll care for me, for my heart is loyal still. Caress me with your low tones. Please keep me at your side. Master, I'm your special mate. Be with me till I die. And now Socks's life is over. His spirit is free at last, for God has special places for dogs who've done their part. Old Socks can rest in peace now beneath our outback river gums. He knows he's done his best with a race that's truly won. And on a desert night that's jewelled with stars that fill our endless sky, his eyes still twinkle softly as he guards his master's side. A soft flick greets the kind hand that strokes his fear with love and care, and his spirit eyes forever towards the nighttime bush will stare. Now, I could have read the other verses, but that would have taken another hour. Now, how do we get to Alice Springs? 1985, October, Maryborough, country Victoria. 6 days before, I'd been interviewed in Melbourne with Jill. They wanted both, because if one person comes to the territory and the other person doesn't like it, you've got a problem. With Jill for the job of principal at St Philip's. It's a gruelling interview. Mrs Heaslip was dressed in navy blue and she had half glasses, I can remember it now. And at the end of the interview, they gave me cream cakes. And that was the final test, because if you have a beard, and my beard was fairly substantial in those days, it can get very embarrassing. Now, after the interview, I spent 3 days consulting my brother. My brother's 3 years older, so he's wiser than me, and other friends. And on the Monday, rang and said I was withdrawing my application. Wednesday night, I did all the, what about this, what about that? Just got totally rational about the whole thing and so on. And on the Monday, I rang and said I was withdrawing. Wednesday night, returning home, I've been to Bendigo taking some kids to an in-service thingo. Returning home, I reached the farmhouse and Jill was leaning on the gatepost. Jan Heaslip wants you to ring. Right. I knew nothing of Jan other than the interview. Jan's a legend, but it hadn't got that far to Maryborough. I rang from the little vintage house. Jan answered, this is fair income, I'm not making this up. Jan answered, opening with the words, "Christopher, what's this nonsense about you withdrawing your application?" Well, what do you do with that? Having spent 3 days of rational thought saying no, I then spent an impetuous 5 minutes and said, yes. Yep, I can be impetuous. And that Saturday we were on the plane going up to visit, that's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We lived in country Victoria, had to put the kids out on adjustment, whatever. And went up to Alice Springs, and we had lunch, we had dinner at Jan's place, and Jan, instead of being super serious, it was a whiz-bang whoopee dinner. It was really lots of fun, etc. And I don't know how long the dinner went. I know Grant went to bed at a particular time. And Jan and I are sitting at the kitchen table going through my terms and conditions of employment at 3 o'clock. It's the territory. So I was really enthralled by that. This is what you're coming to. This whiz-bang, take a risk, all that society, which is great. Early January 1986, loaded the trailer, packed the second-hand Land Cruiser. We were loaded to the gunnels. Jill, 3 kids, 1 baby, including 1 baby, 1 mother-in-law, me and 2 sheepdogs. There wasn't much room. Yep, a fair bit of the Stuart Highway was unsealed, rough as you like, and great for the baby. The baby, incidentally, was Davey, for those who know him. So this might explain a few things. 60 kilometres out of Alice, we ran out of fuel. I was listening to the cricket or something, I don't know, but we ran out of fuel. It had to be 1,000 degrees outside, which didn't impress passengers, because the air conditioner, on my car, the air conditioner didn't run. Jerry can, I never bled the injectors before, bled the injectors, and we're off again. Fortunately, I like tinkering with cars. On leaving Maryborough, I said, see you in 3 years to friends. That was the normal time principals stayed in the job. Well, we fell in love with the place, spent 30 years at St Philip's, and Alice has been our home now for over 40. Alice gets into your soul. And you know what? My son James has just completed 25 years at Saints. I don't know. James, you reckon Henry will take up the cudgel? January 1986, Chris and Jenny Eldridge. Does anybody remember Chris and Jenny Eldridge? Yep. Chris and Jenny Eldridge arrived with a little one, Luke. Chris and I worked together at Maryborough. You know, he would take 9 whatever and I'd take 9 whatever. We were told that we wanted to teach grammar, but we both taught grammar nevertheless because we both believed in it. And we both were used to open the bowling together at Colts Fields Cricket Club. Chris was a really gifted teacher, excellent with kids, and was to be my new, guess? Deputy, that's right. Soon, 70 boarders arrived. The first 2 boarders that... I'm taking a bit more time than my half hour. Does anybody have to leave? The first 2 boarders arrived on the back of the ute. They'd come down from... was it... trying to remember now, but getting up towards the Kimberley. It was Billaluna. They were the nieces of, or grandnieces of Fred Mackay, and they came down and they zoomed into the college, standing in the back of the ute, leaning on the 44-gallon drum of petrol. The things have changed. Chris was a really gifted teacher, excellent with kids, and was to be my new deputy. Soon 70 boarders arrived. Right. One day there was a terrible cry from the swimming pool. Chris and Jenny's toddler, Luke, was at the bottom of the pool. We raced over and someone dragged him out. He'd stopped breathing. I laid him down. I can see him now, haunting me forever. Face blue. It's imprinted on my mind forever. I didn't even clear his airway, I just gave him 8 breaths and thank God he threw up and started breathing. Isn't that, the old EAR, if you hadn't given him EAR, well, probably if you'd given him the whole lot, just by chance we didn't. But I couldn't believe that he started breathing. He was alive. It's the only time in 60 years of first aid that I have had to use EAR, and it was in Alice. Sadly, a couple of years ago, Chris died, and I attended his funeral on the Sunshine Coast. Luke, now about 42, reminded me that he was lucky to be alive. Using students and staff, we had the pool fenced in 2 weeks. We got $2,500 from the Women's Fellowship in Darwin, and given that a whole heap of our kids were station kids, and the staff were pretty handy, and we just got into it and got it done. By March in 1986, Chris and I were concerned about homesickness in the younger students. Relating to St Philip's and the school they attended during the day created perhaps extra pressure for isolated children. The isolated children were often really isolated. One kid, he's playing football, and he said, but they won't kick it to me. They just hadn't had that, whereas today there are a lot of in-schools and things like that they can go to. We came up with the idea of a transition school where we would teach them for the first year before they would move into town schools. I had coffee with Jan Heaslip, my chair at the Aeronova Cafe one morning. Hands up those who remember the Aeronova, right? And put the idea to her. In typical NT fashion, she was enthused. We must go and see the Chief Minister. We must go and see the Chief Minister now. I think the Chief Minister was visiting Bond Springs that weekend, wasn't he, or something? And so we did. It wasn't long before the transition school morphed into a mainstream school 7 to 10. There was demand at that stage for a Protestant high school in town. January 1989 was when it was to open. Much work was to be done in a very short time. Jan took on the pollies, and if anybody wants to see fire and brimstone, just wheel Jan out in front of a couple of pollies. It was great. I used to just look on. Never a dull moment at St Philip's. 1988 and the gigantic Easter flood hit the town. I can think I caused it. The night before, I was trying to decide where we would place the tech studies workshop for the new school. I remember saying to myself, I wish I could see where the 100-year flood would flow. Early next morning, I watched... That's fair income. That's fair income. I probably shouldn't have said that. Early next morning, I watched aghast as the tide rose over the school fence and the child started to come into the school. My four-wheel drive got bogged in the middle of the oval and the boarders pulled me out. This was the day one of the Easter holidays, so there was little what in the kitchen. Food. Water was flowing out of the river, up the drains and into the main streets of Alice. Later, helicopters flew in with food and took out some students who were travelling north on buses. You should have seen their eyes when they took off in the helicopter. I don't think we had parental permission. So, some of them did look scared, and damn, a helicopter broke down on the oval. This was the first part of my third year. A former principal contacted me and asked if I'd put in my resignation yet. It had never passed my mind. I was now here for the long haul. I was an Alice Springsian. Not everybody goes to their first day of school, and the school got rolling. Chris sadly struck ill health and decided he would leave mid-year. He'd been brilliant. In 1988, he was acting principal, and I moved into the position of planning principal. That year, the library was built. That was a Jan initiative, and that became my office. Before that being my office, I had an old caravan. Cool, nothing like pioneering. In 1990, I was still looking for a suitable deputy. A year. I had to get the position 110% right. I spent about a year without a deputy, and that was super difficult. In 1989, my brother also became principal at Beacon Hills School of Melbourne. For a fair time, we were the only brothers in AHESA, the heads organisation. I rang him once and said, Rick, it's really tough up here. I haven't got a deputy. He replied, stop complaining, neither have I. It was terrific because we could discuss whatever together. When he was head of Trinity Grammar, we would exchange students. Both of us would have morning tea with exchangees who would observe us to see if we had the same mannerisms, and they assured us we did. In 1990, I was heading off to interview Chris Leesong, who was to be the next deputy. I was dressed in my suit, ready for a dash to the plane. I had a class to teach first, and I was annoyed that the air conditioning wasn't working properly. It was a swampy, and I was sure I knew how to fix it. Got to be confident. At the end of the lesson, I stormed outside, climbed a ladder, swung my leg over to get onto the roof. Oh, horrors. I ripped my trousers in the process. Needless to say, I didn't interview Chris in my suit. Delusions of grandeur smashed. We needed to expand our boarding houses, and the opportunity came with the federal government introducing the Rural Hostel Project. Life Jill wrote the application, she was very good at that, and off it went to Canberra. Our champion there was Warren Snowden, our MP. We were successful, and the well-designed McKechnie House took shape. Thanks, Warren, and go Alice. Over the time, I visited lots of schools around the world, and the name of Alice Springs has been left all over the place. A common statement was, I've heard about Neville Shute's book, A Town Like Alice, but they didn't know any more than that. 1991, we set out to join the international friendship group of schools called Round Square. In 1996, at the international conference in Kenya, we were accepted as members. We now had a global profile. Our students could travel the world on exchanges, and we could host students from everywhere. One classic exchange was with an Indian boy from the Doon School in North India, a wonderful young man. He had simply climbed Mount Everest with the school the year before in Year 9. Can you imagine the risk assessment? Round Square was a great way to make international friends. We took 3 students to the Kenyan conference, including Franca's son. Before leaving, the parents of the 2 boys said, the boys want to do the world's highest bungee jump. off the railway bridge at Victoria Falls. If you think it's safe, dear, I reminded Frank about this the other day. If you think it's safe, it's okay with us. Great. The boys from our Alice, who are now, I think Nick was 18, wasn't he, that stage? Oh, I hope so. Did the jump, and my career flashed in front of my eyes. Big tick for Alice. At that wonderful conference, we introduced a sing-along for staff as part of the evening social event. I'd taken my guitar, and though from different countries, all were familiar, all these people from all over the world, they were all familiar with the old 60s song. Dylan had gone everywhere. People were all protesting during the 60s, and they had the same songs, just different issues. The times were surely changing. However, Alice was certainly well known by the end of the conference. This happening took place at lots of future conferences. So it became a tradition that we did that. And the Japanese guys particularly would say, "You got your guitar? Can we sing Peter, Paul and Mary?" We had become an identity, and Round Square wanted us to host the international conference in 2001. What an opportunity for the school and Alice Tourism. We accepted with a good measure of yes, Alice can do. But oh horrors, just before the conference, 9/11 took place in New York, and then the following week, Ansett went bust. We lost some delegates. Terry Guest, the Round Square director, said, "Did we want to cancel?" No way. We'll make it work. We can make it happen. It's our motto. It did work. We had a terrific conference, and all the delegates fell in love with Alice. So much so that both King Constantine of Greece and Prince Alexander of Schleswig-Holstein sent their daughters for a stint at St Philip's. Go Alice. Daughter was in James's group on the outdoor camp. Later, we hosted the Australasian Conference and then the Junior Conference. We were surely doing our bit to put Alice on the map. I was on the plane flying to London to attend the board meeting. How am I going? If anybody has to get up and go, don't worry, just do it. I was on the plane flying to London to attend the board meeting of Round Square as the Australasian rep. It was night. I was looking out through the window, and looking down. It was probably Afghanistan, I think. I could see the white snow far below. I remember saying to myself, "Go, Alice. Little old me am on a plane to London to attend a board meeting which will go on Monday from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, after having dinner at King Constantine's place the night before. How exotic. It can only happen to me because I adopted Alice as my home." True dinks. If I was in Maryborough, it wouldn't have happened to me. It was early afternoon on this day, not that day, another day. The Charles was rising, and we needed to get our 600 kids out or face a challenging night looking after them. Just imagine having to sing nursery rhymes to 600 kids. For some reason, there was a council tip truck and a big front-end loader nearby. We organised the students and got a heap across in the truck with a student's mobile wheelchair going in the front-end loader. Then a tour company with their off-road four-wheel drive buses arrived and did the rest. Mission accomplished, adventure in Alice, and I got into marginal trouble with the Education Department. I was on the board of what is now the Independent Schools Council of Australia for 17 years. I would never have been on the board of the Independent Schools Council of Australia if I'd been in Melbourne. Never. And the board was made of one person from each state and territory. It was always fascinating being on a national board because which two states always fight? Yeah, New South Wales and Victoria, by definition. The organisation had well over 1,000 members. Surprisingly, from distant NT, I was elected chair. Was I nervous? Too right. The job was fascinating. Took me to all states of Australia, made me solve many challenging problems, took me overseas several times, in fact more than several times, enabled me to meet heaps of interesting people. One principal I met who ran an innovative environmental school on the edge of Kruger National Park in South Africa, offered to take one of my students as a gappy. Another win to Alice. We are not a backwater. And the student actually stayed in Africa for, 6 years, 7 years. Came back to Alice to say hello every now and then. But with our Round Square exchanges, we've sent hundreds of kids on exchange or international projects to all sorts of places in the world. And we have hosted heaps of students in Alice from everywhere around Australia and overseas. We undertook our own project. It was led by James, who had also been on a Round Square project to Central America, from which he got, what do you think he got? He got malaria. Fortunately, it was identified in our wonderful Alice Springs Hospital. Our project was in Vanuatu, on the island of Tanna, just for excitement's sake, just really near a volcano. It was to build a hall for village youth. We thought we could do it in 3 years, but it was so difficult it took 14. It was a huge task. The project changed to be a church, which was open this year. Alice people don't give up. They will make it happen. Coming to Alice meant I had met heaps of interesting people. I wouldn't have met them if I'd stayed in the deep south. Early in the piece, I asked Mayor Leslie Oldfield why it wasn't the city of Alice Springs. With 25,000 people, I thought it could have been. Maryborough, where I'd come from, was a city of, with only 8,000 people. She said, because it was a town like Alice. I was asked to provide a class of 30 to meet Queen Elizabeth at the Desert Park classroom when she visited Alice. We had a practice with her minders 2 weeks before, and the strict instructions were that students should be in 6 groups of 5 with one spokesman. Yes, only one spokesman, because she only had 11 minutes. Well, clearly, if you're a queen, you can do what you like. She came, was there for, I reckon, 40 minutes and spoke to every single student. It was so impressive. You know, I don't care. Tell the plane to go. I met the Archbishop of... Who else met the Archbishop of Canterbury when he came? No? On Rotary duty, the Pope Mobile broke down at Blatherskite Park almost next to me. Anybody remember the Pope coming? Yeah. I'm standing there on Rotary duty and then boom. Jill and I met Prince Charles as he was at Government House in Darwin with 2 boarders receiving an award. We were the only people there to receive the award. There were about 50 people to witness that, but there were no other people receiving awards. So how that took place, I don't know. Jan? He spoke to everyone there, and when he came to Jill and I, asked, "Do you let your students go home on the weekend?" Our reply was normally. His reply was, "Well, they never let me out." It was Saturday morning, and an old saint was to be married in the chapel that afternoon. I went out to check it, and oh horrors, there was a bushfire coming from the west. I rang the fire brigade, called some staff living at the school, and got the domestic hoses out ready for action. The fireys arrived, and our forces were mustered. The fire got within 30 metres of the chapel and then fortunately turned. The fire chief exclaimed, "You have to cancel the wedding." By this time, our outdoor tank trailer was full and in action, and fortunately, we won the day. Me, I was born, you better not say too loudly because it means I'm an immigrant. I was born at Fieldway, Wolverhampton, UK, 12th of February 1951. Not in a hospital because my mother had chickenpox. The doctor wouldn't come, so it was, can somebody tell me what we had to do? Call the midwife. It was snowing. I think she came on a bicycle or something. It was snowing outside. My father My father, who was a perfectionist, you know, if the picture was a bit that way, he'd get upset and all the rest of it. My father had scrubbed an army ground sheet, you know, this is just after the war, used for picnics on one side, and placed it on the birth bed. I came about 8 a.m, complete with cord around my neck. The nurse sorted that and then discovered my very precise father had put the clean side of the ground sheet down and the dirty side up. So, ladies and gentlemen, I was ultimately born in a paddock. I'm sure it had a positive effect on me, maybe brought me luck, and that's why I came to this wonderful town of Alice. After years, this is fair income, I actually realised the reason for hating tight collars and turtlenecks. And even though I wore a tie for 100 years, I hate wearing ties. In my retirement, I'm busy, which suits me. So much to do in a remote territory. I'm on the board of Somerville Community Services and housing boards and so on, but the greatest fun I have there is going around to the houses and singing with the participants. It's so much fun. I was in UK a few years, it's almost finished. I was in UK a few years ago, found the lane, Shower Lane it was called, in which I was born, and searched for the house, the very house. It was Sunday, and a bloke and his son were leaning on their front gate. I stopped and leant out the window. You wouldn't know which house might have been called Fieldway in this street. He looked at me aghast and said, "Yep, it's my house." "How would you be?" I replied, "I'm from Alice Springs in Australia," so he went white, "but I was born in your house." He told me about the history of the house and showed me the back garden. I couldn't show me inside because Mum was still in a 90, and showed me the back garden and gave me 2 books about the local area. How incredible was that? And he was lucky to have met someone from Alice Springs. Now, don't feel scared about going, but otherwise I'm just going to read a little bit of a poem I wrote one stage. My friend, it's 40 in the centre, beneath the sun and endless stars, amid the tough and ageless red gums, the ranges washed with evening fire. I love the velvet of the morn as the soft night now retires, the last wailing of a dingo, ancient rocks that stretch afar. Well, I better make a mile, my friend. I've a day or 2 to go till I taste Mereenie water from a long way far below, till I meet the dusty road trains as they rumble down the track. I've work to do, but I'm sure you know why I love Alice and this wild outback. I've tramped amid these wide hills, touched the glowing morning light, before the sun's full passion has destroyed the dawn's soft light. I've spied the watchful wildlife as they seek to hide another day, explored my deepest feelings, stroked my dogs which loyal stay. So the campfire softly flickers on rocks born of river sand, as the billies ancient angles slightly, the welcome coals I gently flan. As hope as always springs eternal from beneath my spreading gums, as I sip a mug of bush gold, then set the damper in its drum. Thank you, everybody.
Lots of fun.
Oh, what a gift to our town, Chris Tudor. Are there some questions?
Hi, first.
Yeah,
Chris.
Chris, there's a question.
Oh, you think red doors around cricket after a cop like education? Lights like that.
Oh, I'm sure the metaphors would go on. And I'm glad you were here, Jan. Oh, yeah, I'm glad you didn't miss that. Such a strong relationship to the school and to Chris. Yeah, thanks for being here. So thanks everyone for coming. I knew it would be no problem to fill the space. Cheryl, we'd love to invite you on another occasion. So yeah, sorry you just had one of those days. Our next Living Histories, so it goes straight in your diary, is on August the 30th. So there's a little bit of a gap, but we're going to have the Splinters, the female choir, who'll tell us a little bit about themselves individually and then perform for us. We'll have Stella Hayes, who's done some fantastic work with Keith out at White Gums in the time that they've lived here in Alice. And Mary Blakelock, who's been was a long-term principal with also a very big story. So yeah, August the 30th, love to see you all again. Thanks to all the workers over here, the committee members of Friends of Araluen who make it happen. Yeah. Karlika who chairs, and yeah, everyone here working and doing what they can. So we still continue to raise money for Araluen. Yeah, as most people know, we bought the grand piano, which we're very proud of. We're just in the process of buying a humidifier for it so it can be sustained in this very dry, generally very dry climate. And we bought pieces of art and we support Araluen in just whatever way we need to, whatever are their priorities. So thanks, everybody. Another, I think, really riveting, great I just want to say thanks to Jasper too over here, the tech for Araluen, keeps it all happening.
You've got to man this.